welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The mandate of the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing is primarily to formulate and implement the policy of the federal government of Nigeria with respect to the generation, distribution and transmission of incremental, steady and uninterrupted power supply, also to improve road transport, highway construction and rehabilitation of federal roads and bridges nationwide, as well as to boost a robust housing economy. Joining us to talk on his wins and challenges in these three critical sectors is the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Raji Fashola. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning. How are you today?
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Many thanks for joining us, Minister. Let me start by asking you, how are you coping with your super ministry? I mean, some people will say you have aged quite rapidly as minister than you did as governor of Lagos State.
Well, people are entitled to their opinions. I'm getting on with my job, and I have two ministers of state who work with me.
Great. Well, your ministry plays a critical role in the nation's economy and will be a major determinant for President Buhari's re-election bid. As you know, one of his focal points was the economy. Are you under pressure to deliver projects to make up for campaign promises?
I'm not under any pressure to deliver projects for campaign promises. We set out a clear plan from when I assumed office. We set out our agenda, and we have faithfully implemented that agenda. We set out to deliver first incremental power, move on to steady power, and hopefully get to uninterrupted power. We also set out to reduce journey times on road by resuscitating abandoned road contracts and awarding more. And we also decided to start a national housing policy, first by formulating and deciding for Nigerians, with Nigerians, what type of housing was acceptable where, in what part, and in what form it should be built. And we've delivered on all what we have said.
Okay, so let's take a look at this power sector now. 7,000 megawatts is what you claim we are generating for a population of about 200 million people. Is that the best you can do? Even that is debatable, you know that, right? As the discos in the country continue to dispute this figure, and besides, the highest volume of electricity ever wheeled out through the transmission grid is slightly over 5,000 megawatts.
Now you're putting so many things together. What I announce is not what I say, is what the figures show that the capacity of the generation companies today, if you can demand 7,000 megawatt, they will generate 7,000 megawatt. And that is progress from where we started. We started at about 4,000. We've added 3,000 over 3 years. That's an average of 1,000 megawatt per annum. When you compare that average to 4,000 over 16 years, you will see that our run rate of 1,000 megawatt is faster than the previous run rate of 250 megawatts per annum. Now, what the distribution companies can distribute is dependent on the assets that they have. And I've also addressed this question about measuring an economy, measuring energy with the population. Perhaps it might be helpful to explain to you that the amount of energy that a country needs is not just a quantum of its size, but also the activity that that population engages in. So if you have essentially a trading economy, like in a place like Area, for example, there are 37,000 shops there. All of the energy they need to run is just a little over 5 megawatt. The reason is simple. Most of what they need are small bulbs, light bulbs, small equipment, and so on. Each bulb is 60 watts. So a megawatt becomes defining for that kind of market. It's different when you are talking of industrial concerns that need multiples of megawatt. A place like Lafarge in Gombe requires about 16 megawatt, as big as it is. So people really have to tie these needs to the function to which energy is being applied. That does not, of course, suggest that there may be no increased demand as more supply comes. We recognize that there's a latent demand somewhere when Nigerians perhaps begin to use more electricity for cooking, for heating, instead of other means. But this is what we have to do, and there is no proclamation about energy. You build it through the life cycle of construction. The construction requires that land be acquired, it requires that financing be put in place, it requires that transmission lines be built through communities who want compensation, and so on and so forth. So if we are delivering 1,000 megawatt per annum and we can increase on that, I am proud to say that we have done better than what we met.
Is that your claim now? Okay. Well, you know, Minister, I certainly run a generator 24 hours at my home. I don't know about my co-anchors here, Aaron and Adeswa, you know, Tundu. I bet you run a generating set in your home, right? Now, the question I have to ask you is, are you immune to these power cuts that go on every day? Do you have power 24 hours in your office?
Certainly not, and that's why I said we were starting with incremental power before we get to steady power and then uninterrupted power. I didn't commit to saying that within 3 years your generators will disappear, but I think that the important thing to say here is that if you look at how much you are spending on running your generators, if you look at how much you are spending on buying new generators compared to 2015, clearly you will see a difference, and the difference is a better one, that you are spending less. Power supply from the public grid is for longer hours than 2015, but that by no pretense do I suggest that the work is finished. The work isn't finished, and it's a continuous work to do. We have a project, for example, between Ikot Ekpene and Ikot Abasi, trying to construct through a community the transmission line that will add another 1,540 megawatts. It's delayed by compensation issues. So, and that has to be done. If you pass through people's land, you have to pay. Those are the laws of Nigeria, and we must comply. So these are the realities of dealing with it. And I don't know where you stay, and it's mixed blessings across the spectrum. Some people have a better experience. Some people's experience is not as good as others. Some people want meters and haven't received it. Some people have received their meters. So we haven't reached everybody. But I think we can get to everybody, but it will take time. And we have a plan that takes us to everybody. And that's why we are also developing mini grids for those who cannot be served on the grid, so that you can connect your own power independently without having to go through a transmission line. We've put in mini grid regulations. That's the first time it's been done in this country. And now, between policy, regulation, what remains is the uptake, how the implementation of the regulations impact people's lives. So we're going to use that in 9 universities. We've used it in some markets, and we intend to, we expect more people to uptake it and get on with their lives.
Yeah, Minister, you have said that we should not compare, you know, the population to the power generated. But many people would dispute that with you. I mean, the rule of thumb with our population, we are falling way back. If you look at South Africa...
No. I didn't say that.
You want to explain that? Because if you're adding 1,000...
I didn't say that. I think you should understand me.
Okay.
I think you should understand me. And if you're discussing energy, I think it's important to... I think you should understand me, and if you're discussing energy, I think we should also be knowledgeable about what we're discussing.
Minister,
but it's fine that you have brought in the South Africa.
Let me just finish what I'm about to say, because when you look at the population of Nigeria, which is almost 200 million, and we're generating, as at present, 7,000 megawatts, and you're planning to add 1,000 incremental each year, we are falling way back. When you look at South Africa with their population, they are generating approximately 40,000 megawatts already.
Okay, now, that is the usual cliche on the streets. And I think I am not a victim of cliches. I inform myself and I educate myself. If you go to South Africa's power system, you will see a major player there, Eskom. Eskom is in debt, Eskom is struggling, but be that as it may, when was South Africa's power built? It was built over the years. South Africa generates energy not only from coal, but also from nuclear power. We don't have that here. South Africa is certainly a more industrialized nation today than Nigeria. They make heavy equipment. They are a very active mining nation. And so that is where their big demands of energy go. They don't go only to power residencies and trading outlets. If you look at Nigeria today, our industrial takeoff is just about to begin. And that is why President Buhari is focusing on building the rail, building the road, expanding the ports, and so on and so forth. As we go along, I am confident that with the plan that we have, we will be able to meet those industrial needs for power and the mining needs for power. The point I made, which I will repeat, is that the amount of energy that a nation needs or a household needs is a function not just of its population, but what it does. So you can find in a hotel one building with many activities consuming more energy than a whole street, where all of the energy they need on that street is just to light up the house. That is the point I make, and that is the point that I urge you to understand, that it is not just the numbers are relevant of population, but it is what they do with energy that is more defining in terms of the amount of energy that they need.
Honourable Minister, what alternative energy sources is your ministry currently working on in terms of solar, hydro, wind, and what have you, gas? Can you elucidate?
Again, we are exploring every source of energy that Nigeria is able to efficiently deliver. The source of energy that a nation chooses is ultimately an impactor of how much citizens pay for energy. So Nigeria is not a wind-prolific country. We don't have the wind speeds at efficient rate. Not that we don't have wind, and I like to be very clear, but for us to use wind, we need to build at higher altitudes the infrastructure. That cost will then be passed on to the consumer. We are experimenting with a wind project in Katsina, and it's a 10-megawatt project that we inherited and that has actually stopped work when we came in. But we are now generating 2 megawatts out of it. There are about 22 turbines left to finish. But we are very prolific with solar, and that is why we are promoting the development of solar, not just by policy, but by action. There are policies in place that give pioneer status to those who manufacture solar plants and solar components, solar panels, lithium batteries in Nigeria. That has been put in place by this administration. There are import duty incentives there also for those who want to bring them in. We are also deploying solar in Dadinkowa, for example, as a pilot to demonstrate that solar can work in markets. 13,000 shops will be served in Dadinkowa, Sabongari market, pardon me, Sabongari market. We are also, out of the first 9 universities, we are piloting for dedicated power in their schools. 7 of them are solar, and the construction work has started. But our other prolific area is gas and hydro, and that is why projects like Azura have come on. That is why projects like Kashimbila, Dadinkowa, Gurara, hydropower projects that the president and the government are committed to. That is why President Buhari is pushing very, very hard to start work on the Mambila hydropower project that will give us 3,050 megawatt of power. That project has been on the drawing board for about 40 years. We've just signed the contract. We're negotiating the financing. We have also 6 small hydros, Ikere Gorge, Tiga Dam, and so on, that are coming to council for approval for private sector uptake. So we are pursuing all options, and we are piloting one particularly interesting coal option around the Kogi Benue belt, just to implement the energy mix that we announced in Kaduna in 2016, that we will use all of the options so that the cost can become more competitive when it gets to the consumer.
All right, Minister, let's now get into the internal working of the Ministry of Power here in Nigeria. You and Discos have been at loggerheads for the better part of your stewardship. One of the reasons arose from the eligible customer declaration. The Discos have maintained that they have a monopoly on electricity distribution in their areas of coverage. But you have disputed this, citing the Electric Power Section Reform Act. My question now is, shouldn't the focus be on getting on-grid power to all Nigerians? What makes some customers more eligible than others? And with the declaration, aren't you crippling the discos which are already illiquid?
I think, first of all, it probably makes sensational news to call my action an action of loggerhead. It isn't. If you look in the law clearly states that the minister has powers to declare certain classes of customers eligible. Now, as you said in your introduction, the focus of the ministry and his ministerial remit today is policy and directions, and that is what I have done. I've simply done what the law says I can and should do. What was the purpose? On the one hand, you report, and people say that there is not enough power to power industries. Now, we have power. The discos can't distribute them. All of the fault is not theirs, but they have enough to carry. And there is an opportunity for industry the power. Those who are generating the power are saying, okay, we have 100 megawatt, we can only sell about 60 because the discos won't take them. So what does government do? I, as minister representing government, says, if you want more power, buy directly from the GENCO because the discos cannot give you all of what you want. That's what eligible customer declaration is. No more, no less. Now, I didn't act alone. I now sent that directive to the regulator, NEC, to make regulations to ensure that nobody is shortchanged in the implementation policy of my, in the implementation process of my directive. So what does NEC do? They do what they are mandated by law to do. Consult everybody who will be affected by the process. So they consult discos, they consult GENCOs, they consult transmission companies. They also speak with the industries who want to take the power. And then they pass regulations about how this will work. At the moment, I think about 5 industries have taken on the eligible customer thing. They are doing well. They are winding down their generators. They have more reliable power, which is what we want. At the same time, we haven't left the discos behind. We have passed. I've also passed directives for transition charges to ensure that they are compensated for any losses they can have. You see, and the beautiful thing is that I didn't make that law. Nigerian people made it through their elected representatives. And it says clearly, I think in section 67 or so, that there's no exclusivity for any franchisee or any licensee under the law. That is simply what we are implementing. So we have to break an egg to make an omelette. It won't be a perfect world. If the discos do not want any customer to opt to be an eligible customer, give him the energy that he needs, because the energy is there, at least for now.
So, Honorable Minister, there are those who say the distribution, how about deregulating the distribution prices of electricity instead of this eligible customer declaration you have? Have you considered it an alternative so that the customers can afford to pay for what they can afford? So deregulating the price of electricity rather than having an eligible customer declaration that you have.
It is not the job of the minister to determine the price of electricity. That's not my work. That is the work of the regulator, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. The only opinion I have expressed is that I think it would be fair to consumers to ensure first that they have meters before you review the rates upwards, so that at least people can control what they consume. And my views have been borne out by the evidence that when people have meters, it has been proven that in some cases, not in all cases, in some cases, they pay less and they are able to control what they use. But the person who has the authority to determine whether electricity price goes up or down is not President Buhari, is not Vice President Oshibajo, is not any minister, including me. It's a regulatory commission. Like NCC, it is NERC. They fix the price of energy, and they do so in consultation with all of the stakeholders, not excluding consumers.
Honorable Minister, you've been accused by the discos of dabbling into their areas of franchise using the Rural Electrification Scheme. They say that your ministry has been awarding contracts to electrify tertiary institutions, which are predominantly in urban areas, and this is just an avenue to award massive, lucrative contracts to yourself and your cronies. What is your take on these allegations?
If you have taken enough information from the discourse to accuse me, I think it is important to ask them to produce the evidence of the contracts that have been awarded. And the first thing I would say is that it is totally baseless. We are trying to ensure a balance here. And I think that the discourse, and I don't want to generalize them because I know that there are some responsible people amongst them, and I know that there are some people whose actions are not driven by purity. So I would resist the temptation to be generalistic. But the point to make is that when I supported NERC's review of a tariff price for consumers, when I supported the review of an upward review of tariff in 2016, the discourse didn't complain. It was the citizens who complained. So it doesn't look like I can win here, and I'm not trying to win. I'm just trying to do my job. I thought that a review at that time was fair and helpful to the system. When I proposed that government pay 27 billion out of what they owed to the discourse didn't complain. So when I asked the discourse to do their job and to perform their contract obligations, I become the bad guy. But as I said, I have no side. The only side I have is better service for Nigerians, and I stand in the middle, protecting by policy all of the players in the value chain.
All right, a follow-up to that question, you've also been accused of being overbearing as the minister in charge of the power sector and have more or less emasculated the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, which is supposed to be independent in its role as the regulator in the industry.
Well, I don't know where you get all of these accusations from. And you see, when accusations are made, they must be supported by facts. I think my role, I set out clearly that I will meet with all of the stakeholders, and I did that at the time that the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission was not fully constituted as required by law to make any decisions. And there was a vacuum there as to policy direction. But I never at any time took over the role of NERC. If there's any instance where I've exercised the role of NERC, let them bring the evidence, those who make the accusations. And I think that part of the responsibility in journalism is also to investigate and see whether accusations have basis or are baseless. And I think it is usually unfair to bring out accusations or to repeat accusations without challenging me with the evidence so that I can respond. But by the by, that is what comes with public service, and I am used to this. You can't win, and as I say, there is no desire to win. It's to do your best and move on quietly into the night when your time is gone, when your time is done.
All right, but in time past, you have publicly actually empowered and ordered NEC to actually take decisions in regards to discos and what actually happens to them.
If you look at the law, you will see that I have powers to give directives to NERC. I do. I've acted within the law. And anybody who thinks that those directives I gave were unlawful should go to court and challenge them. And I will meet them in court and put up a very, very vigorous defense of my actions. Right. In fact, you said in your opening statement to this program, that the focus of the ministry is policy and directives. That's what I've done.
All right, Honorable Minister.
I think we should all read the law.
Okay. All right, Honorable Minister, this question has been bothering me for a while. Why is it so difficult to meter Nigeria? I mean, what's really going on? The metering gap remains absolutely wide. I mean, should this be something that is so difficult?
Well, it's difficult but not impossible. First of all, you need to understand the metering process. For you to get a meter, your house needs to be visited. The appliances you use must be documented. Your energy consumption must be known. The first reason for that is that we need to know what class of consumer you fall into. There is the R1 consumer, which is the basic consumer, whose tariff is, I think, 4 naira per kilowatt hour. There's the R2, there is maximum demand, heavy users. So if you don't have the right meter, you are likely to overpay or underpay. And that will hurt either you or hurt the discos or the gencos or somebody in the system. Now, to visit every home to do that is a logistic challenge which must be overcome. Secondly, the total capacity of meters that are producible in the country today, if my memory is correct, is about 400,000 meters annually that can be produced. The gap is 3 million. That was what the DISCO signed on to do. And that is what we're working with them to ensure that they do. In fairness to them, they have covered some distance, but there's still a gap. And that gap has to be filled. And that gap provides an enormous opportunity for Nigerians to play, unlike what we did with the cell phones, where we imported all of our cell phones from China. It provides an opportunity for small businesses to set up SMEs to make meters, assemble meters as is going on. It provides opportunity for us to train technicians. It provides opportunity for us to gather data and create data entrepreneurs, and that is what we are doing now with the meter asset provider regulations. Again, that was a directive from my ministry to respond to the meter gap. As a result of that directive, to license new people other than the DISCOs to supply meters to consumers, just as you have independent people supplying telephones to consumers rather than the telcos, NERC has made regulations for this to start. 108 applications have been received from small businesses, and they're talking to their banks now, trying to raise funding for this. These challenges create enormous opportunities for us to also respond to unemployment and entrepreneurship and economic issues. And that is what this government is doing.
Honorable Minister, formerly known as Your Excellency, you were Governor of Lagos State for 8 years and now have been a super minister of the most powerful, the biggest ministry, for almost 4 years. Can you compare and contrast life in the executive at state level and at federal level? What do you prefer?
Well, if I served as governor for 8 years and I've served now as minister for 3 years, and I think that you're asking me to compare apples and oranges, maybe at the end of my tenure as minister, no matter how long or how short that becomes, I will be able to make a better comparison. The only thing to say is that the experience has been extremely enriching and rewarding in terms of the knowledge I've acquired about Nigeria, the people I have met, and my belief about the promise of this country, and that nothing is wrong with our country. We just need to do a little more. We need to all work harder, come together, and build this very great country. I've traveled this country, and its possibilities are simply immense.
All right, sir, let's move on to housing, sir. Okay, do you agree with those that say that you have focused solely on power and road infrastructure and have neglected housing?
I disagree, and it depends on who is saying what. So I like to, you see, people can make assumptions from afar. And I think that this is a good opportunity to first explain and use this medium to reach people, to say how many people understand what it takes either to build a power plant or to build a road or to build a house. You first have to acquire land. Federal government does not own land. So the first process was to write to all the governors to please give us land. When that land is given, in some cases, you need to pay compensation. If there is no compensation issue, you have removed one task. The next is to go and survey the land. And then you do soil investigation to see what is under the land so that you know whether to build with piling or not. Otherwise, the investment you make might be lost by the soil conditions. When that is done, you then need to do a layout plan. You need planning approvals from the state as to how the road will be, where the water will come from, and so on. This takes time. Then, more importantly, there's the assumption that there is a shortage of houses. I like to have this debate because the pressure on housing is mainly, if not solely, in the urban centers, Lagos, Benin, Port Harcourt, Aba, and all of that. But even in those places, there are empty houses. Abuja, Lagos, all of them have houses that are unoccupied in this Kano. Now, the question to then ask yourself as a problem solver is, why is there scarcity when there are empty houses? Something is wrong, and that is what I am addressing. How do we fill the acceptability gap? Because if those houses are empty and people say they want houses, it means that they're either unacceptable to them or they are unaffordable by them, or both. So we did a survey. We have developed a plan as a result of our survey. We are now piloting housing in 34 states. So those who say we are not doing anything don't understand what we are doing. I use this medium to explain it, and any other medium, I will make myself available. So we're building houses in 34 states. What that does first is to create employment for people. On each site, no less than 1,000 people are working there. Artisans, painters, bricklayers, the food supply chain too, vendors. So this is already ticking up the economy, which was the housing economy we set out to catalyze, as you rightly pointed out in your opening remarks about the mandate of our ministry. The next thing is to then see whether people will accept those houses based on the report of the survey and whether they can afford them. If those two things happen, then we're on our way. We can build scores of houses that people will buy, not people will neglect.
Yes, we understand that Lagos State is not part of the 34 states in which you are having this pilot housing project. Why was Lagos excluded for a state which is said to have a housing deficit of about 2 million and remains the commercial hub of the country? Is this because of the fractured relationship between you and your successor, or why was Lagos exempted?
The reason we're still waiting for the land that we requested, and it's not only Lagos State. I think Rivers State also gave us land just recently, and we have to take possession of the land and all of that. And there was no fractured relationship. I finished my job in Lagos, and I've moved on to another job. And when I finish here, as I said, I move on very, very quietly and happily into the twilight.
All right, Minister, to what extent would you address these housing deficits in the country? How many low and middle income earners would own these houses, and how are these projects being funded? Will the Nigerian government access mortgages to buy these houses?
Okay, the plan first is build the pilot from government funding, so it's budgeted for. When we want to go to scale, it is doubtful if government alone can fund all of the real housing needs that then come out. And that is why mortgages are an option. Mortgages are largely being driven by the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria, and that bank gets all of its funding from the contributions of employees under the National Housing Project. One of the things that the board of the bank has recommended, which I've approved as policy, is that for those people who want to borrow only up to 5 million, the requirement that they should pay, I think, 10% of their equity. I have removed it as recommended by the board, so that those who can't put up that capital are not disqualified from accessing credit. We have also done that for those who are borrowing 5 million up and above. Their capital contribution, I think, was about 15%. We reduced that to, I think, about 10%, just to make it easier for people. That's one aspect of funding. The other part is to recapitalize the bank and improve its asset base so that it can grant more loans, because it grants loans at, I think, about 6% or thereabout. So that's that. What we plan and what we expect to see is that once this model is validated, then private sector can come in, take their own land, agree costs with us, and if you can build at our cost, we become the guaranteed buyer, in the sense that we can provide mortgages to people who want to occupy that house. And that should be an incentive for builders and for all of the entire value chain that surrounds the housing economy, those who make hinges, those who make cement, iron rods, paints, windows, nails, doors, keys, and toilet and bathroom appliances. That is what we see ahead. But it has to be done properly, and it has to be planned. Incidentally, this is the second national housing policy that the country has ever undertaken, and the credit must be to President Buhari for identifying this as a major catalyzer of the economy. And as I said, we're already seeing jobs coming in. We're using wholly made in Nigeria doors, wholly made in Nigeria windows, wholly made in Nigeria nails and paints on all the sites where work is going on. And it's a truly remarkable story about building from the bottom.
All right, Minister. In the area of road and infrastructure, your government has boasted that there is no state where road construction is not ongoing, right? And at what stage are these projects? And would you say that enough credit has been given to the previous administration? Because we all know that these projects are not new.
Well, when I say that there's no road in which, there's no state in which we are not constructing a road, I don't boast. It is simply a statement of fact. And why it is important is that in the past, you heard some people say, oh, we've been marginalized, nothing has been done, there's nothing happening in my state. That is not the case today. So the country is being brought together. Unity is being built around infrastructure. No state genuinely can lay claim. People are entitled to ask for more, but it will not be on the basis that nothing at all is being done. And that's a marked difference from where we came from. And where we came from was that many of the road projects had stopped. Some for 3 years, some for 5 years, because contractors were not paid. Do I give credit to the previous administration? It is not my style to come on and say nothing has been done at all. I have never made those kind of generalized statements. I acknowledge what I receive, and I move on from there. But I'm entitled to compare. And in terms of comparison, I can tell you, we're building 365 major road projects now. Out of those 365, I think 244 were from the last administration. What we changed when we talked about change was that we paid contractors. It was impactful because contractors had not been paid for 5 years or 3 years on those projects. So that was change. We got their workers back to site. Now, we have added another 121 new contracts for roads. That makes up the 365. Now, when I say we have done better, it does not mean that the administration before us did not do anything. I'm saying that our run rate is better. Because if you look at those 244 routes, were awarded in 2001. So when we met them in 2015, they had run for 15 years. If you do a simple math, 15 by 244, you will get something like 16 or so. So it meant that they were doing averagely 16 roads per year. If you do a division, 121 divided by 3, it means that we are doing over 40 roads per year. That is change. We are running faster in spite of the fact that people accuse us of being slow. Our run rate, our results are quicker, our delivery is better, the contractors are happier. You go and interview the contractors. One of the contractors told me that for the first time in 10 years, he doesn't owe a bank anymore because we pay them quarterly. So this is what is changing. One contractor told me he had to order 600 new tires for his tractors and his equipment. This hadn't happened to him in 5 years. I go around the country and I speak to their workers and they see the difference, that money is coming in regularly. We are doing more with less. This is happening at a time oil prices are below $100 per barrel of oil. So it doesn't take away credit from the previous administration. It just shows a comparison that this team is better than the last team, without a doubt.
Minister, you know, critical highways such as the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, Aba-Port Harcourt Road, even the Apapa-Oshodi Expressway, it looks like a war zone right now. I mean, why has your administration failed to complete these projects, especially the Apapa one? You know, well, what's really happening?
It wasn't a completion failure. It was a starting challenge. And we had to go through all of the procurement processes. You had to do a design for the road. Only one section was afforded by the previous administration. That was the section between Mile 2 and Coconut. And that is out of what we are doing now. What we are doing now is Creek Road all the way through Tinkan, excluding the part awarded, I think that's about 7 kilometers, and going beyond there through from Mile 2 all the way to Urunshoki. And we are also doing the, I think it's Point Road now, if I recall correctly. That had to go through procurement process. We had to get values, we had to get design, cost, bill of quantities. We had to go through BPP, get approval to proceed, that the costs were fair and competitive, and then go to Federal Executive Council. That's what it takes. That's simply what it takes. I have complained publicly that our procurement law is not consistent with our urgent developmental aspiration. The time it takes to procure a project needs to be shortened. the processes need to be reduced. But those are legislative matters which I cannot do except by persuasion.
All right, Minister, what is the status of the road projects being funded by the 100 billion naira Sukuk bond raised by this administration last year? At least funding was provided by the Debt Management Office to your ministry for road projects in the 6 geopolitical zones.
Yes, we raised the Sukuk, and if you recall at the time, some people even didn't want a Sukuk. They accused President Buhari of trying to Islamize Nigeria. We went out to explain that Sukuk money had no religious color. It was just a cultural way of lending money that was different from the Western way of charging interest. What Islamic lending does is to own a part of the assets or collect rent rather than charge interest. But what we did with the Sukuk was that we divided the Sukuk 100 billion into 6. So each zone was to get 16.6 billion, I think. And no zone has returned his own share or said that we should stop work in spite of their Islamization claims. And they are seeing the benefit now. 25 roads are being impacted across the 6 zones. Some zones have more roads, some zones have less roads. But the first point was to ensure equality of zones. And then depending on the number of roads, we apply them to those roads. Those roads have made progress, and we're trying to raise another Sukuk. And those who drive through those roads will tell you that their driving experience has improved, their journey times have improved, which was what we set out to do. Journey time reduction, cost reduction, ease of doing business. That is what this government committed to from day one, to make business easy, not just through the bureaucratic process, but through transport infrastructure that enables people to do things in more efficient and competitive time. And in all of the sections where we have finished work, commuters express and improve journey time. But our work is not finished. Some of the roads we are constructing are roads that run 200, 300 kilometers, and we are doing 10 lanes of some, 5 lanes of some. So if you are doing 200 kilometers by 5 lanes, you are in effect constructing 1,000 linear kilometers of road. That's a lot of man hours. You require granite, you require sand, you require stone, you require bitumen to be mined, to be transported. You require batching plants, you require man hours. And you also have to respect labor laws. There's a maximum number of hours you can put your workers to before you allow them to rest. So these are the logistics now. But the interesting story, the true story, is that construction work is back. Construction indices are going up. If you check the MBS reports, you will see the construction indices compared to 2015 are higher than they were in 2015. And manufacturing is back. And this is what infrastructure investment does. So our government is building the foundation of tomorrow's prosperity, a foundation that would enable us withstand the future vicissitudes of oil and commodity price changes, where we have a robust infrastructure, a household in which everybody will be safe, and where prosperity and jobs will from there flow. But the foundation has to be robust, and it's based on infrastructure, roads, power, rail, housing, and so on and so forth. And then the money and the jobs will come.
Honorable Minister, we know you're a busy man. However, we crave your indulgence to stay with us a little bit longer. But let us take a break so that you can catch your breath. And when we come back, the Minister will be back with us to discuss politics. So please stay with us and our viewers as well. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. And the Minister of Power, Works and Housing, Babatunde Raji Fashola, is still with us from our Abuja studios. Let's engage you a bit on politics, Mr. Minister.
Welcome back.
What is your take on the state of politics in Lagos State? Great, thank you for coming back with us. What is your state on politics in Lagos State, which you governed for 8 years? Do you agree with the manner that your successor, Akinwumi Ambode, was pushed aside by the so-called governor emeritus of the state, Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, to pave way for Babajide Sanwo-Olu in the coming elections?
Well, I've just observed things from from a distance, really. And one of the things I told myself when I was leaving office was not to interfere and to only intervene. And there's a difference between both. If your counsel or your assistance is required and you are asked, then you intervene. If your counsel and your assistance is not sought and you get involved, you are interfering. And I think that there's something to be said about that. I look at leaders from across the world. Once their time is done, they leave the stage. Just park the bus and let the next driver take it on. And what I do all the time is to continue to pray for the success of all of those who took over from me, because really their success affects me, because as a citizen I then depend on them to serve me as well. And so that is it. There are no guarantees of tenure in politics, and things can change very, very quickly. And we have seen that across the world. We've seen that we are in government today because an incumbent president didn't get a second term that he hoped he would get. So there's nothing. The important thing at the end of the day is you've given your best shot and you move on. It's a public trust. Nobody owns it.
Honourable Minister, earlier on, we spoke on the ease of doing business and laying the foundation for Nigeria's prosperity. This seems to tally with the plan of Atiku Abubakar. Why should Atiku Abubakar not be elected president?
Well, let me say, first of all, Vice President Atiku Abubakar and I have a personal relationship, but unfortunately, I think on this matter, my views are that President Buhari's hands are steadier at this time, and I think that Nigeria will benefit a lot more from re-electing President Buhari to consolidate on the work that he has started. It's very tough work, building a house from the foundation, but that house of prosperity foundation is now being put in place, and I think it will be helpful and beneficial to our long-term interests to have this done. That said, those are my views. And I think that President Buhari's methods in reducing our importation of food, making that an opportunity for local farmers, investing in infrastructure, using that to catalyze mining, and using that to catalyze local capacities, and issuing an executive order trying to domesticate all of these opportunities for Nigerians are the things that are needed now to build, as I said, from bottom up. And if those views that you now say Vice President Atiku Abubakar is championing now, they come belatedly after we have laid out our plan and have actually started implementing it. And so, in a manner of simplicity, really, if it's going to start from where we have started, we're already on the way. So let us finish what we're doing.
Let me take you back to Lagos State. You said, you decided to take a back seat and observe from afar. But Lagos is your state. You governed the state for 8 years. When you look at the sitting governor, is said to be a lame duck governor. I mean, policies that you are known to have started that pretty much worked under your administration have failed or collapsed, from environment to traffic situation in the state. It's a crazy situation in the state. You seem not to have anything to say about this.
Look, as I said, I can't legislate for my son, who is just 25, what to do. And there's a job in public service, and there's an office there also. And I think that you could not say kindly and fairly that no effort has been made. Whether the efforts are sufficient or not is a matter for the electorate to now decide. And I think that within the party structure, they think that more can be done. And that is a matter of hindsight now. And I think we should just move on from there and get behind the team of Sowolu and Hamzat, because they also have a lot of experience. And I think that the foundational work that has been done in building Lagos should be entrusted to those who started that foundational work instead of experimenting. I know that it may be tempting to want to think that way, but having served there, I know that these two guys have the better knowledge and the experience to continue from where it is. And there are no guarantees of the, you see, I wish there was a life without problems, but that life only exists in an utopia and in a dream. So there will be cycles of hills and valleys, and I think perhaps after every hill, there comes some valley. The important thing is to quickly climb out of that valley and get back to the top of the hill. And I think that the two guys, the pair that you have there, can take you back to the top of the hill that you so much crave for. But as far as I'm concerned, my time is done, and I am now a citizen. I expect to be served when I get there, and I am sure that that would happen in the fullness of time.
Yes, Minister, you just said your time is actually done, all right, in respect to governorship in Lagos State, but you almost got the same treatment from Asiwaju Tinubu in 2007 when you were seeking re-election. What is the state of your relationship between yourself and Tinubu, and also yourself and your successor, Akinwumi Ambode?
We are cool.
Just cool?
Is that all you have to say about that?
You asked me a question, we're cool.
Well, there appears to be a conflict as to which geopolitical zone your party would like to hand over power to in 2023. For instance, you, at two different occasions, one in Ibadan, or your state capital, and Ikeja, Lagos state capital, have said that the power should return to the southwest. Now, you have other leaders in your party, for instance, Joe Ibokwe, who is saying no, it should go back to the southeast. So which should it be? Where's your party taking power to in 2023?
The Nigerian people will decide where power goes. And I think it is important, again, to understand that when I went to Ibadan and to Lagos, it wasn't only politics that we discussed. We discussed infrastructure, we discussed power, works and housing, we discussed rail by Governor Amechi, the rail project that was being constructed, Lagos to Kano Rail, going through Papalanto and all of that through Ibadan, and through Monia. We also discussed water supply by my colleague, the Honorable Minister for Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu. But you must recognize that people vote for different reasons. Some will vote because they feel that the infrastructure will help them get on with their lives. Some will vote because they just want their man to be in power. So that was part of the package. So to ensure that we didn't leave anybody unattended to. Maybe that was the only reason, that was the only message somebody came to hear, that look, there's a chance here that if we vote for APC and Buhari in 2019 and the opportunity for rotation of power comes, we may be in the forefront of the peak. That may be the reason why somebody, and it's important for people to vote. If you look at the agitations we have, I haven't gotten my PVC, my name is not on the voters register, and then go back to check the number of people who actually turn out to vote. Barely 30%, that's not good enough. So, and if you look at the Southwest, that has potentially about 14 million votes, that's a very, very defining block vote that the APC wants to take a sizable part of and getting people out to vote. So if anybody feels a sense of challenge to what I've said, I find that quite encouraging. They should come out and respond to that challenge with the numbers that they too have, whoever they may be. But I am focused on the Southwest. I am a Nigerian of Southwest extraction, and I can only speak about my household.
The perception is that there's a plot by some members of the APC in the Northwest and Southwest geopolitical zones to ensure that power continues to rotate between these zones. Indeed, the talk is that this has been hatched by the likes of yourself and Nasser El-Rufai, and that this is the reason you have promised the support of the Southwest to Buhari in 2019, so that power can be transferred to the Southwest in 2023. Your comments, Mr. Minister?
Okay, we've moved from accusations to plots now. So, but what is the evidence? I mean, this is politics now. This is politics. If you have the numbers, it's all about numbers. And you know, our politics is in an exciting place, and we need to then begin to recognize it. If you look at other democracies, you will see that there are some places where, for example, in the UK, there are some places where you will never get a vote for Labour. And there are some places where you will never get a vote for the Tory party. Same thing for the Republicans and Democrats. And ultimately, this will come down to cost management. That is why you will see that presidential elections in the US don't go around all the 50 states. They target states that swing, because you know that it's a waste of time to go and spend your money in certain places. You won't get elected there. So, and this is becoming a pattern. For those who study the political pattern, as I have attempted to do, you will see that in certain places, some places won't vote for you, not because they don't like you, but that's just how they are wired. Some places vote because of faith, some places vote because of ethnicity, some places vote because of economy and ideology. Contrary to what people say, that there's no ideology in our politics, ideologies have been clear. Go and look at the voting patterns from 1979. And you will see what way certain zones of the country vote, what political party ideology, and it's beginning to crystallize. And those who work the mechanics of politics now must begin to understand that and know where the votes are likely to be and where they are not likely to be, and know how to sensibly use their money, and know what the issues will define what the votes will be.
All right, sir. So what are the chances of the APC holding on to power in the coming elections, especially that of President Muhammadu Buhari? And what assurances are you giving that your government would hold credible elections and not use the security forces to prevent the PDP supporters from exercising their franchise, as it was the case in the supplementary and by-elections in Osun and Kwara states?
Well, let me say that when we had no access to the coercive powers of state, the police and all of that, we won an election. And so we don't need the coercive powers of state to win an election. Let me say that very, very clearly. And don't forget, the APC was a party that was never going to happen. It happened. It was a merger that was never going to take place. It took place. The elective convention of the APC, the first elective convention, was the one that was supposed to break up the party. It never happened. The presidential primaries was the one that was supposed to break up the party. That didn't happen. Then the president was the one that was unelectable. He got elected. Then the president was the one who will not assume power. He has assumed power. So again, in response, I am optimistic that he will retain power. It's a tougher elections, but I am sure that President Buhari, the APC, will retain most of what it has, and in some cases take a little more.
Minister, it's been a grilling hours, but let me just ask you this as we wrap up. Which is the most challenging for you under your portfolio? Power, housing, infrastructure? Which is it?
I will resist the temptation to speak on that now. When I'm done, I will be able to evaluate better.
We understand that you have actually launched and mobilized 5,000 foot soldiers for President Muhammadu Buhari re-election in Lagos. That took the 5,000 foot soldiers.
They're already working in their political area of residence and activity, mobilizing voters, but in a different way, sharing the message I have shared through your platform with Nigerians, telling them what President Buhari has done and his government in Lagos State, roads like Lagos-Abeokuta-Ota Road, Ikorodu-Shagamu, Badagry Expressway, Apapa Urunshoki to toll gate roads, which had been abandoned for over a decade, have now been awarded. Work has started in some places. Some contractors are just mobilizing to site. Ejigbo, Aja, and other substations that have been built, those that are going to be completed. That is the message they are taking down to the grassroots, so that we can equip our people with a message of why this government should be kept in power to finish building the foundation for our national house of prosperity. So that's their work. And the campaign strategy is different, and our opponents will find out sooner rather than later that the horse has actually bolted from the stable.
But, Minister, the story really, in case you did not get it from my earlier question, and what is actually filtering is that the leader of the All Progressives Congress in the Southwest, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and the national leader of the party as well, is not pleased with this mode of campaigning which you have decided to take on this time around. And so he's hampering the job of the 5,000 foot soldiers. Haven't you heard the story?
Has he told you that?
That is the news
that
we are
he's
getting.
not pleased with getting voters for our party.
That is the news we are getting. I mean, that's
no, has he told you that he's not pleased with getting votes for our party?
Oh.
Has he told you he's not pleased with getting votes for our party?
Well, he hasn't personally told me, but that is the story making the rounds in Lagos State.
So why are you speculating?
I'm just asking you. I mean, that's what is in the news. You know what he used to tell us? He said on
election day. Whose news?
Is the news making the rounds? Is the news making the rounds, Minister? So you haven't heard this story?
No politician will be displeased with getting votes for his party. I would like to see that politician. And they are not more political than Asiwaju Bola Tinubu. They don't come more political.
Let me also ask you this question, Minister. The 5,000 foot soldiers, we hear that there might be a plot by the former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and, okay, is there a plan? We might have to take a break now, Minister. We seem to be having some communication problem.
I think you need to do.
Yes, and we'll be right back in a quick bit. Stay with us, please.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Thank you so much for staying with us, Minister. You know, we've really enjoyed your presence. Yeah, really. So we're just going to go back to power real quick. NEC has deferred the upward review of electricity tariffs after the last one done in February 2016, even though it's supposed to do so under the multi-year tariff order. Yet, this government signed a power purchase agreement with the Azura Power, an independent power producer that generates 461 megawatts of electricity in Edo State to supply electricity to the national grid at a premium, and even cover the agreement with a sovereign guarantee of $800 million. Now, the FG is in default of the agreement for not paying Azura Power, and the company led by one Mr. David Ladipo has moved to call in the guarantee. We understand that your ministry and the Justice Ministry have been put on notice. This appears to be yet another deal that may likely be disputed and may go all the way to arbitration. Is the federal government ready to cough up such a huge amount? And why did it provide a sovereign guarantee to this power company when it did not do the same for the other GenCos?
Okay, good. Let me just quickly clarify. We're not in default. The payment cycles to Azura, like all other GenCos, go with the payment cycles of the electricity industry, where we first collect what the discos have paid and remit that, and then we provide the balance by the payment assurance guarantee that the Buhari administration put in place to ensure that gencos who have invested in power get paid for generating power. That also said, let me say that the Azura project was not initiated under this administration. It had started before this administration came in, but they couldn't start work, they couldn't complete the papers because government bureaucracy just didn't respond to them. That was one of the first things that this administration did. I think between June and July, I wasn't minister at the time when the power purchase agreement was signed. But also it is instructive to point out, because you compare Azura to other gencos, this is the first privately funded power plant of that size that has ever been built in Nigeria. So the terms and the conditions, given the economic and political variables, were fiercely negotiated. We, and I say this, we, as minister and my team, inherited this when we assumed office. But my first take is that we have signed, and agreements must be respected. And if they become difficult, they can be renegotiated. If all agreements are without disputes, there will be no need for arbitration clauses. So there's a mechanism, should there be a dispute, to resolve agreements. And that is what happens in every civilized country. If all contracts were performed and awarded, there will be no need for lawyers for the plaintiff and the defendant in breach of contract cases. That is life. At the end of the day, there is an abiding commitment by this government to keep its own terms and side of the Azura bargain. And to the best of my knowledge, we don't have difficulties at this moment. Have lessons been learned from the Azura power project? Yes, certainly. Because as I said, the source of power that you choose ultimately defines how much energy is delivered to your consumers. At the time that Azura was being signed, the problem in Nigeria was there was not enough power to sell. That was the story before I became minister. The discos wanted more power to sell. The story has now changed. There is more than enough power to sell, but we are unable to sell what we are producing. That's a new problem. So we need to work on the discos side. And in going forward, the bulk trader, Mbet, is also looking at all of the term sheets and the templates of all of his existing PPAs that have been signed before and new ones to be signed. That's why you probably hear from some companies now, oh, they want sovereign guarantee, they want this, and we're saying, no, wait a minute, it's not government that needs the power, it's the people. Why don't you modify your business model, take your energy to the citizens, go and do bilateral contracts with the discos, because people who sell generators get their power sold without asking for sovereign guarantee. And if all they are selling is just a power plant, you have molecules of energy, which is what people actually need. Take it to the market. We will support you, and we'll put in policies to enable that happen.
All right, Minister, let's indulge us one final time. We understand that the federal government is considering a review of the Mambila Power Project that is to be funded by the Chinese government to make it viable. We gather that the review would entail cutting the planned 3,050 megawatts envisaged for power plant to about half. Is this true?
No, I don't know what you mean by a review. The contract was awarded to deliver 3,050 megawatt of power. And that's the design scope. What is actually built out is a function of actual realities based on feasibility studies and all of that, and water supply. Don't forget that the turbines, I think if I recall correctly, are 12 turbines, if I recall correctly, 12 turbines to deliver that energy. How many turbines can be used at one time or fully as base power depends on the volume of water that is supplied to drive the turbines to produce electricity. Because the fuel for hydropower plants is water. And what the water does is almost similar to what your gas or your diesel engine does. They turn the mechanical side that turns the electromagnetic side that produce alternating current. So it will be a function of how much water the Mambila hydropower plant is able to deliver, how much rainfall is available, given the realities of climate change today. And don't forget, this project was conceptualized, I think, in 1970-something, and we have now concluded contract only in 2022. 2018 or thereabouts.
Thank you so much for your time, sir. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. We really enjoyed having you
Thank you for
here.
having me.
Thank
It's
you.
time now for a short break on the morning show.